Articles 4 and 6, State Relations and Supremacy. These articles deal with something called federalism, which just means that we don't just have one government in the United States. We have the big government that we've been talking about, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, but we also have state governments. We all have a state that we live in, and that state has its own government as well. So you don't just have the big government, you have little or smaller governments as well. We call those state governments. And the fancy way of saying that is federalism. Just that the government is split up into federal, or the top government, the national government, and then the state governments. So we're going to look at the structure and powers of those two articles, 4 and 6. We're going to be able to see what states can and cannot do, and why we have states. And we're also going to be able to answer how the Constitution influences state law and processes. So even though states get to have their own government, they still need to make sure that they're following the Constitution. So Article 4 says that full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. All that means is that every state is equal. No state is considered better or more powerful than any other state. So even a state that's small like Delaware and a state that's very big like California, they're still treated equally. California doesn't have more power than Delaware. They're supposed to be treated equally because they're both states in the United States. So these articles talk about the relationship between the states and the national government, and what that relationship is supposed to be. So every state has the citizens who have these same rights. So we're all from Pennsylvania. There's people from New York. Just because they're from a different state, that doesn't mean that they have different rights from us. There's some things that are different, and some laws that are different, like driving age or things about gun ownership. There's small differences, but the big things are all there. All the things that we have as protection in the Constitution, like freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, the right to a lawyer, all of those things are things that we all have no matter what state we live in. The other thing is that if a state is ever invaded by another state or by a foreign power, the national government will protect all of the states. So let's say, for instance, some country comes and invades New Jersey. New Jersey doesn't have to defend itself. The entire country will come to New Jersey's aid and defend New Jersey. So it sets it up so the states are all part of the same country and almost like in one big alliance. So just because New Jersey has a problem, that doesn't mean that the rest of the country is just going to ignore it. Some examples of things that are equal between the states. If you get married in one state, you're considered married in another. So it's not like you have to, if you want to be married, you live in Pennsylvania and you get married. It's not like when you move to Ohio, you have to get married again. It wouldn't make sense. So that's just an example. If you're married in Pennsylvania, it's recognized throughout the country. Same thing with the driver's license. If you want to drive in Ohio, that doesn't mean that you have to have an Ohio driver's license. If you can show a Pennsylvania driver's license, that's okay. Unless you move to Ohio, then you probably want to get an Ohio driver's license. But having a Pennsylvania license would make it so you can drive in any state. Another thing, criminals. If you commit a crime in Pennsylvania, that doesn't mean that you just go to New York and then New York's not going to do anything about it. It's New York's job to return you to Pennsylvania so you can get put on trial for that crime. So just because you go to another state doesn't mean that you can't be returned back to be put on trial for that crime. And it hasn't happened in your lifetime or my lifetime, but there can be new states. New states can be admitted, and there's a whole process for it. It hasn't happened since the 1950s with Alaska and Hawaii, but there is a way for new places to become states. The place that's usually talked about as a place that might be a state is Puerto Rico, but it hasn't been made a state yet. But there is a way that it could be made into a state. Some other things about the states and the relationship between the U.S. government and the states themselves. We're going to go through each one of these on the next couple slides. The first thing is the Supremacy Clause, which just means, yeah, the states can make up their own laws and they can have their own ideas and kind of ways of doing things, but the federal government and the Constitution are supreme, or they're the supremacy. they're the ones that are supposed to be the top, the government and the laws that are seen as the most important. So yes, the states can kind of make up their own laws, their own way of doing things, but all of those things have to follow the Constitution and have to follow the way that the federal government or the national government is doing things. Article 6 sets up an oath, which means that if you're a member of any part of the government, you have to take an oath that says that you will uphold the Constitution. You'll hear the president do this when the president gets sworn into office. So the oath is something that everybody has to take if they get selected to be a part of the government. So what's it have to do with you? If your state's being unfair or trying to enforce unjust laws, this article protects you. It makes it so the states can't have laws that go against all of those rights that we have in the Constitution. The representatives for us within the state, they have to uphold the Constitution. They don't have to just do things that benefit Pennsylvania. They have to keep in mind the laws of the entire country and the rights that we have when they're coming up with and making decisions. So remember to answer the questions that are below my face. Make sure to join us for a class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you have questions and need help, just contact me. My information is there. If not, good luck.